Hi, I'm Joe Makuc, and this is uh, an interview on November 19th, 2021.
Yes.
Yes. And the other voice you were hearing just now is Wanda Romero, longtime Norris Square community gardener who I previously interviewed. In this interview, on behalf of PHS and the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society Cultivating Community Gardens Histories Project and the Norris Square Neighborhood Project, is going to focus a little bit on Wanda's experience in Norris Square and growing up, and of course her experience on as the daughter of the inestimable Tomasita Romero, as an organizer, gardener, and friend to many in Norris Square, and a true like figure in the community. Um,
Correct.
yes. So I guess we'll start with the very basic question again. I remember you said that you grew up in Fairmount.
Fairmount,
Yes.
right towards the Center City area, around Fairmount Park.
Yes. And did you or your neighbors have gardens there? Not a community garden the same
No,
way. Okay.
no,
Yes.
no gardens when we were children. No gardens. We,
Mm-hmm.
we would go to the Fairmount Park with our parents, because again they were from Puerto Rico, so they were used to always dealing with farmland, dirt and trees and plants. But back in those days, they didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
But the love of the land and always planning was always there,
Yeah.
because that's a cultural thing from the island. You're born and raised with it. But yeah, that didn't come to way after when we moved
Yeah.
to Second Street
Mm-hmm.
and closer to Norris Square.
Yeah. And so, speaking of Norris Square, speaking of your parents, and
Right.
speaking of relationships to the land, um, so uh, what was your first gardening experience like?
Well, my parents were hard workers. They both worked and they needed help.
Mm-hmm.
So the children had to help. I mean, you just don't come home from school and that's sitting, watching TV. We got chores to do, whether it was cleaning the lots or helping mother, with running to buy any dirt or anything that she might have needed for the gardens. So, that's when it all began. We had to help out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, speaking of your mother, yeah, could you talk a little bit more about Tomasita, just as you
My
know?
Yes, my mother was a very passionate, very helpful, very into the community kind of person. She was affiliated with United Neighbors Against Drugs. She
Mm-hmm.
was affiliated with Mayor Good, with the city. She protested, tried to clean up the area because these lots were like abandoned lots with a lot of dirt and junk on them, and we won't even talk about what was in them. But they all got together with Grupo Motivos and all the women and Iris Brown, and everyone started to clean them up. The city had a contract with the Horticultural Society as well and Norris Square, and that's how they implemented having the gardens. For the neighbors to be a participant of cleaning them up. We were allowed to plant vegetables and flowers, um, but not for personal use. It was for the community. So anybody who needed anything, you were allowed to not only use it but also reap whatever was planted. Whether they were
Mm-hmm.
tomatoes or herbs and spices of this sort. So yeah, she was she helped a lot, and she helped implement it with Sister Carol, um and it was really Sylvia, was the first founder.
Sylvia Metzler.
Yes, Sylvia Metzler. She was dear friend. We used to visit her at her home. She kind of took my mother under her wings and kind of taught her, the aspect of running, some organization like this, because my mother, had no clue. But with her and Sister Carol, they started it,
Mm-hmm.
and they did so much for the community. they done. I'm telling you, even the lots, when you look at what they used to be, filthy, and then now they're now pretty gardens. It's a lot to be thankful for, and not everybody has the guts to do that. That's a lot of hard work. She was working. She was a school teacher's assistant, at Hunter School, and then after that, then she came straight here and would do all volunteer work, and all weekends.
Yeah.
So she was very giving of her time.
Yeah, I remember. I think Iris told me that her and Tomasita would work
Endlessly.
From dawn
Endlessly.
well into the night.
Yes. Right. Correct.
That when they were thinking of things they could do to attract people, onto the cleaned up lots, and
Get involved.
Get involved and educate about.
Yes, the culture
about
to the
culture.
children. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the children, you have to realize that you're in school here, and yes, we have to learn. We're here to learn, and you got to learn the language, English, and sometimes you forget about your Spanish language, and you sort of get lost with your own culture because you're in America, so you start doing American things, and you really don't even want to learn about Spanish vegetables or cooking or anything like that. But it's something that it's sad because it is part of who you are, and a lot of the younger generation don't even know how to speak Spanish now. They really don't, and they don't want to know. They don't want to talk it. They'd rather speak English, and I get it. They say we're in America. When you go for a job, you don't need Spanish, but that's not necessarily true. Because a lot of jobs today, whether you have someone from a South American country or Mexico that don't know English, they use you as an interpreter. And I found that to be an asset and a plus for me because I'm in the medical profession, and in the hospitals I was able to interpret for a lot of Spanish-speaking people that didn't know English. So I could, talk with the doctors and the nurses, and I can, figure out what they needed. But so, it is a plus. It's a plus to know any languages. It doesn't have to be Spanish, just another language. But unfortunately, the younger generation, they're into a different vibe, and you as much as you can try to ask them to participate or, it's sad to see them getting a little lost, where they don't want to, participate in gardening or learning how to cook Spanish or anything like that.
Well, speaking of the younger generation, we have this picture of the mural here.
Yes.
At 2224 North 2nd Street. And so for me, what I see when I look at this mural, which is
my grandmother's house.
Your grandmother's house.
Right.
The little house with a tin corrugated roof on stilts.
Yeah. And wood. Yeah.
Yes, and wood sideboards.
Right.
And then you have
chickens,
goats,
and pigs.
Yes. And a lush valleys.
Yes, and farmland. Yes. That was my grandfather in the background with my mother in the picture. Yeah, my mother always helped him because my mother was one of the oldest, of 5 children. So she helped, and then she helped her mother as well. Her mother was a maid for rich people in Puerto Rico. She used to clean and iron their clothes. That was her job. And then, she would come home and, and when the kids were out of school, then she would, do the motherly roles of cooking and all of that. And she was very religious as well. So my mother was very religious. They would go to church a lot. But it was a very hard, difficult life back then. They didn't have plumbing. They had a water well and an outhouse for a bathroom. I used to go as a child, and I used to be very afraid to use the outhouse because there were bugs, and I used to cry. I used to tell my daddy I didn't want to go into the outhouse, for those reasons, because we were used to the plumbing here, in the United States. So we were what I considered rich. And when we would go back to my grandmom's house, I saw how poor she lived. And we brought her here. We brought her here to live with us, but she didn't like it. She hated it. She hated the cold. She wanted her chickens. She wanted to go back to, living the simple life. Mm-hmm. When you're old and set in your ways. She used to smoke a cigar. Yeah, so those were, beautiful memories that I have because that's part of my culture. and even Iris Brown, will tell you her stories as well, and that's something that you don't want to forget. Your ancestors, how hard they worked. Her father died young from TB, and her mother, we got to bring her here, and she died, at a later time of a bad heart, but she was a strong woman, very religious, very Catholic, and going to church a lot.
Yeah, I think you mentioned. I think you
Yeah.
mentioned, and it's apparent
Right.
from your stories that like
Right.
your grandmother passed down to your mother, and now to you this ethic of generosity.
Right, right. Oh yes, always giving, always helping those in need, because they saw so many poor people suffer. Back then there wasn't too much medicine, anything like that. So if a neighbor needed something, you would actually go and help them, whether they needed food or a couple dollars or whatever you could do. You would help. If you had to pay a bill, I mean, my mother paid many bills. I mean, I used to look at her and say, "Mom, what are you doing?" But it was her money. She worked for it. I couldn't tell her what to do with her money. And she would. I would see her pay neighbors' bills, and I was like, "What are you doing?" She would tell me, "Mind your business. This is my money." And she was right. She was right.
And not just gardening the Norris Square Gardens,
Right.
and in the unnamed PHS,
Right.
sponsored community garden next to 2224 2nd Street, but also cooking, right?
Right. Well, they formed Grupo Motivos, which was a group of the Hispanic elder women in the neighborhood. They were the elders, and they were teaching the younger generation how to cook. Because you forget how to cook the Spanish rice, from scratch. So you don't have an electric cooker, it's a cast iron, pot. So
To get the bagal.
yes, the pegal, right, and even for holidays, pasteles, acapulrias, and all that, you have to learn how to cook that. If you don't, you're gonna lose your tradition, So they did form that. And that was magnificent, but eventually it didn't last for whatever reasons. I don't know what occurred, but whether it was funding or whatever it was, the city started to sell off the properties, and they weren't letting us use them anymore, and so that's what happened with that organization. They had a house where they
Yeah.
used to cook.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the time you're talking, well, yeah, by the time that you moved here from Fairmount, it was like the 60s.
Yes, it was in
Yeah.
the 60s.
Yeah, so
It was in the 60s because I'm a 50s child. So I was
Yeah.
probably in the 5th grade when I moved here.
Yeah.
So I was fairly young, but again, the neighborhood, it was a Polish and Ukrainian neighborhood when we moved here. So a lot of the St. Boniface School, which it was located only 2 blocks away, we were not allowed to go there because we were Hispanics. And they said that was strictly for Polish and Ukrainians that were all living in this area. So I was really amazed that my father was able to buy a property on a block that was, non-Hispanic, as they say, with the prejudice of, different cultures.
The racism.
Yeah, the racism, right. But, it was hard because we used to have to walk to 8th and York, which was a lot further to go to St. Edward's School. And we were little, so we had to walk in the rain, winter, it was rough. And we did it, walking back and forth, I mean, sometimes you got chased, and you had to run home. Because there was a lot of racial tension, where they didn't want the Hispanics or the blacks, in the area. So it was hard. And there were many fights in Norris Square, where they would fight with my cousins, and so it was hard. It was hard, but eventually, everybody came to peace, but
Okay. So let's see. I have a few other questions, I think, but and also, of course, well, not related, but maybe related. I'm thinking about Thomas's cooking again, specifically.
okay.
And I think you mentioned her flan.
Yeah, she was very famous for her flan. Even in when she was at Hunter School, a lot of the teachers would order them for holidays or birthdays or any special occasion. So she was famous for that. And there were a couple restaurants in Center City that actually wanted to contract her to make their desserts, but that was like an all-day thing, and Mom was involved with too many projects, and there was no way she was going to be able to commit to something like that. But her flan was very famous. It was indeed. That and her bread pudding. Her
Yes.
bread pudding was also phenomenal. I mean, a lot of people try to capture that, even with her giving them the recipe. Would never be the same. Her hands had to touch it. Her hands had to do it. Because they would make it, it would be okay, but not like hers. So even me, I could never even duplicate what she did. And I tried.
I might have a comment for after the interview. Mm-hmm. Just an anecdote. But okay. So I guess I wanted to also establish a bit of a timeline. So you come here, you came to the North Square neighborhood. Yeah, in the 60s.
The 60s.
You did not come to 2222 and 2224 Front Street. I mean, Second Street. Yes. First.
No.
You moved.
We went to Fairmount. Yeah,
Yes.
Fairmount Avenue is where, I think I was born in that area. And,
Right.
Right.
And so then when you came to Norris Square, you lived originally, or when you came to like this area, you lived originally.
In the 60s.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so the community garden established there was like in the last 20 years?
Right.
Yes, I believe we can, like the PHS has records of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Right.
get that. And I also wanted to get the mural. Talk about the process of developing that.
The mural, they were starting to do a lot of murals in the area. So one of the artists contacted my mother and asked them what could they put there that would depict pretty much her life. And she remembered and told the artist the story of her mother's house. And I don't think she had any pictures of the house. She just we remember because we visited it. So we could tell them how exactly it was set up and how it was and the land that they had to farm right there. So she just told them by memory, and it was phenomenal how he captured that.
And that was in like the last couple of years, right?
Well, no, the mural's been up there, I want to say at least 15 years. It's been a while that the mural's been up. Yeah.
It's a beautiful kind of bookend to the garden.
Oh, yes, it is. And it tells her story.
Yeah.
It's like her legacy, pretty much.
Her legacy facing the rose bushes that she
Right,
planted.
exactly.
Yeah.
And at least that helped her to feel like she was back home, in that garden. So I think it helped her, to take her back and have fond memories of her childhood.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this follow-up.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate getting to talk to you, Wanda, and learning more about,
Sure.
Tomasita's.
Mom's legacy.
Yes.
She is an amazing woman.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn the recorder off now.
Okay.